So after I posted a video about an influencer's recent skincare makeup prep brand launch, I couldn't stop thinking about the response it got. Now, I wasn't surprised that people were against this brand launch, right? The creator themselves, they're polarizing, and a lot of the criticism came from personal views and past behavior, and were all completely valid. What did surprise me though, was how many of those people who were angry in the comments were contacting me on Instagram and TikTok. How many people, based on their own content and their own skincare routines, were using products from major brands with far more serious ethical issues. Brands tied to environmental destruction, exploitative labor, or openly racist and homophobic leadership. Just so you know, when people comment certain things, I'm gonna look on their profiles. I see comments they've left before, so I know the brands that people are using if they have non-private social media. And I was ready to kind of like sit here, hit record again, reply to some of those comments and ask, how are you outraged by this? But not by your favorite shampoo brand destroying communities, polluting people's communities. But the more I looked into it, the more I realized this isn't necessarily about hypocrisy. It's about the complex, messy, very gray space that we all navigate as consumers. Every time an influencer launches a brand, and I mean every time, there's instant backlash, claims of greed, inauthenticity, and cash grabs. Again, the majority of time these claims are pretty valid, but when a massive corporation with a history of environmental damage, or as I said, a racist CEO drops a new product, complete silence. So what is really going on here? Why do we hold individuals to higher moral standards than billion-dollar companies? And why are we more willing to call out an influencer skincare launch than a tech giant profiting off child labor, for example? Chapter 1, influencer branding seems inauthentic. Influencer brands, the very first thing that comes to mind, and an accusation that gets thrown around a lot when an influencer launches a brand, is that it's inauthentic. The brand and the influencer themselves. To a lot of people, influencer brands and celebrity brands just feel like a cash grab. I do find this phrase a little bit silly, even though I've used it myself, because everything people do is for money, right? Especially when it comes to creating a brand. They don't seem like they come from any particular passion that the influencer has for the products, but more for the potential to make money from their followers. Even if they are talking like they love their products, still in the back of our heads we're like, they're just doing this for money, which again, they are, it's their job, right? But for example, let's say an influencer who's never shown any interest in skincare suddenly announces that they're launching their own skincare line, throwing out buzzwords, claiming that their products are clean, effective, and science-backed, or something along those lines, right? The audience are probably going to wonder, like, where has this idea come from? Why are they doing it now? Or why are they doing it like at all? And if the creator doesn't give clear answers to all the above that actually make sense, then the audience are going to feel like they're just cashing in. Even if they did have some kind of expertise or consistent passion for skincare, if their products aren't well thought out and aren't different, you know, something new and exciting in the industry, then it still just feels like a cash grab to most people. The trouble is that too many influencers do think that just because they put their branding on something that they can mark up the prices as well to ridiculous levels. They'll produce a product which is about as generic as it gets, but then they'll slap their face in it and charge like 30 quid for it, you know? Something you get for like a $5 from The Ordinary. In some cases, right? Now, you might be thinking, isn't that what most brands, especially luxury brands, do all the time? And nobody really cares. And yeah, you'd be right. The problem I think people have when it comes to influencers though, is that they aren't traditional brands. Most successful influencers have built their careers on being relatable and trustworthy. And when an influencer seems to be launching a brand without a clear and authentic kind of like foundation to it, it does feel like they're abandoning what made them special in the first place to a lot of their followers. And influencers invite scrutiny by selling their identity, right? A brand like Unilever doesn't say, this shampoo represents who I am as a person, it's just a shampoo. But influencers do. Whether directly or subtly, they frame their brands as a reflection of their values, as a natural extension of their content, and as something they've poured their heart into. You know, a lot of these influencer brands can feel very samey if it doesn't come from a real place of passion and things that they thought about before. We've all seen it, minimalist beige packaging, the buzzwords that are clearly been given to them by a marketing team because they don't know what they're talking about, or claims of like disrupting the industry even though there's no real innovation here. And we see that in celebrity pricing too, with the very basic formulations. Audiences have seen this like one too many times by now, like the influencer to brand owner arc. It's just kind of like a rite of passage for a lot of influencers. So we've seen this happen time and time again. So the audience aren't easily as taken in as they once were. People are far more skeptical nowadays when it comes to influencers. They've seen the blueprint for influencer launches and they're watching the warning signs. Influencers filing trademarks quietly before teasing the product. There being no story behind researching ingredients and formulating products. Launching into these saturated markets again with nothing new. And immediately going straight into huge retailers. You know, we've all seen it before. Retailers. Why did I say it like that? And to a lot of people, all this could scream like, we had the following, we had the funding, so why not cash in? And that's when people start asking whether this was ever really about the product and the passion for the industry, or whether this is just another way to monetize their audience. And honestly, I feel like it can be both. I don't know why the two can't coexist. Like, I love skincare, I love what I do, and if I was ever to launch a brand, I would put my whole heart into it and genuinely hope that I did have something new and amazing. Would I be cashing in? Would it be a cash grab? I would hope to make some money from it because this is my job. I don't want to create something then be in like debt because of it, you know? There are so many awful influencer brands, but when it comes to beauty related ones, I genuinely don't really think they're a cash grab if there's a beauty influencer involved. I think a lot of the influencer brands that I've personally seen are a great combination of what's already existing in the industry meets the thousands upon millions of consumer feedback that they got in their comments for what people actually want, or the slight differences and tweaks that they want in their products. That's personally how I feel. Then they compare that to what they consider authentic product launches, right? When a creator has a clear passion for something and has talked about for years and years, shown genuine expertise in that subject area or solved a real problem with their product, it feels earned in a way. And you know, that's just down to us to judge really whether we feel like this comes from a place of passion, money, whether the brand feels authentic to them. It's all about marketing at the end of the day. But authentic brand launches are also about timing and context. So sometimes even if a product is good, the timing of it can kind of feel gross, like launching a luxury skincare brand during a recession, dropping like a clean girl brand when you've never presented that aesthetic, releasing wellness products whilst visibly being unwell. The internet has made consumers hyper aware of intent. If your product launch feels like a move, not a mission, then people are going to call it out fast, right? So how are influencers, how do they prove that it's not just a cash grab? They need to convince their audience that what they're doing is for them as well and not just you, kind of thing. You will always get some fans who'll just buy whatever an influencer releases without questioning anything, but most fans have higher standards these days. But this lack of authenticity, by so many influencer brands is only part of the story, right? Next, we need to talk about why this makes some fans so angry. The backlash that these influencer brands receive seems to be on a whole other level compared to corporate brands and even traditional celebrity brands. So why is that? Chapter 2, Parasocial Relationships. So to me, the most obvious reason for this, backlash, is that we care more when influencers do something questionable because we care more about the influencers themselves. Most people don't have a very strong connection to big brands. Like, nobody really feels like L'Oreal or Shiseido, for example, are their friends. Like, you don't watch what L'Oreal are doing and comment like, hee, this is so fun, you know? But you do with your influencer friends. But this is common now for fans of a particular influencer to form a parasocial relationship with that influencer. This makes us obviously feel closer to them. So when they do something that we see as a betrayal, it hurts on a more personal level. So just in case you're not sure what I'm talking about, a parasocial relationship, I'm sure you all know, but anyway, is when a person feels emotionally connected to a figure in the media, even though they don't actually know each other personally. It's become really common, really common, especially in the last decade with the rise of YouTube in particular, most commonly happening with like celebrities, obviously Instagram influencers, YouTubers, and TikTokers. And nowadays it is less common than that celebrity connection, right? And if you think about it, there is a good understandable reason for that. Part of the influencer job is to create a closeness with your audience. You need to be able to understand your audience and they need to be able to understand you, you know what you want from each other. Talking to the camera as if they're talking to you personally is something that creates that relationship, sharing incredibly vulnerable and personal moments to their audience, saying things like, love you guys, you're like my family, we've grown so much together, all that kind of stuff builds this relationship. And they're all true. Like, I can sit here as an influencer and say they're all true. You know, I'm not saying they're doing this in like a cynical way. There are influencers out there who are genuine genuine and really feel like that, you know? But I think most of them do these things naturally because they genuinely want a close connection with their followers. And it can feel very real for a lot of people on the other side of the screen. Some people have been following them for years, you know, and many influencers post at least once a week, right? If not more than that. That means you see them and possibly interact with them as much as you would like your own family, or even more so than a celebrity who probably releases like 1 or 2 films every year. Who else do we get that from except our own families, right? So it's not surprising that it can feel so real. Our brains can't fully distinguish between digital intimacy and real life connection anymore, I feel. It gives you the same emotional attachment, even though the relationship often isn't reciprocated. So if we've created a connection with an influencer that makes them feel like a friend or family member, then it just hurts so much more when they turn around and act like a corporation who doesn't care about us, who are just wanting to make some money, right? When an influencer we care about launches a brand that feels like low effort, overpriced, and doesn't align with what they've always stood for, or an influencer reviews a brand that people see as that, then it doesn't just feel like a bad product, it feels like a betrayal. You trusted them, you were convinced they were different and like real, right? And that they actually cared. And don't get me wrong, a lot of influencers do. It just means that that betrayal makes you even angrier. That's why I think we see such strong backlash against disingenuous influencer brands and influencer brands in general. Again, deciding whether they're disingenuous, whether they come from a place of passion, is just personal opinion, is down to you. So when an influencer does something what we deem wrong, we often see their posts flooded with negative comments. They get hypercritical reviews pointing out things that they wouldn't usually care about. We get deep dives on YouTube about their shady actions, right? Accusations that they're a sellout, accusations that they're being paid off by someone, and large numbers of people celebrating the brand or the influencer's failure. And I'm not saying this reaction isn't deserved, don't get me wrong, but we don't react the same way when big brands do exactly the same shady things. And that's because we've never had that same relationship with a big brand that we do these influencers. Big brands don't act like your friends. They try to, you know, they're all like, hey queen, in their emails, but they're trying really hard nowadays. Nestle, for example, doesn't call you family. L'Oreal wasn't vlogging about their breakup. I'd be interested in that. And Unilever isn't always promising to be like real and honest with you. You know, it's just not the same thing. These big brands never claim to be authentic in the first place. They're here to sell us products. They're here to push trends. They're there to maintain margins and flood the market with 47 different versions of the same thing. And people know that. We know that. We've lived like that for years. So when these brands drop yet another shampoo, another serum, another cream, whatever, it feels authentic, because authenticity was never a part of the deal with them. Influencers have kind of like blurred the lines between friend and brand. You know, when we talk about influencers, when it comes to marketing, we're always like, what's your brand? What's your unique selling point? But we're also real people. So there's this weird blurred line, right? And for some people, when they launch a brand, it feels like a personal stab in the back. It feels like they've sold out. So it gets this bigger response. And that brings me to the question, we may not have the same personal connections to big corporations as we do influencers, but shouldn't we care just as much when they behave unethically? Chapter 3, Moral Fatigue with Big Brands. Now, I think something called moral fatigue plays a huge part in how we process injustice and unethical behavior, and it has a big effect on how we react to influencer brands compared to big corporations. Moral fatigue, you may know as compassion fatigue or ethical burnout, is a mental and emotional exhaustion that comes from constantly being aware and exposed to or asked to care about moral or ethical issues, especially when those big issues feel too big, systemic, or otherwise unchangeable. The kind of like, what can I do kind of thing, which I feel like is a lot of people nowadays with the state the world is in. And it's okay. It's absolutely okay. It's emotional burnout from trying to care about everything all the time, all at once. There are just too many issues in the world for one person to care about and try to make a difference in all of them. And what's sad is for those who do genuinely care and want to be morally good people, you start with wanting to do the right thing, right? And wanting to help. You learn about all the things going wrong in the world. You get overwhelmed by the sheer number of issues there are. You feel like you can't possibly fix them all. You feel bad, guilty, and exhausted by it all. Then you have to start to disengage to stop feeling bad about yourself. You end up feeling numb, and like you can't do anything to change what's happening. And this is how moral fatigue works. And it is really difficult to escape. Every week, Even every day, we are shown another cause to support or another brand or person to hate. Another brand has done something shady and is being boycotted. Another celebrity has posted an offensive tweet and is being cancelled. There's been another natural disaster and we need to donate to help the victims. There's another war, there's another murder or another tragic death. Human rights are being stripped by the government. Huge companies are destroying the environment and blaming us. Millions of people are starving to death and dying of curable diseases. There's always something new, always something wrong, and it doesn't end, it just keeps growing. And obviously I'm not saying these aren't things worth caring about, aren't worth knowing about. We should know and we should care. But there's just so much that I personally can't blame anyone for getting overwhelmed by it all. It's hard not to. If you do really have compassion, so I'm not laughing, but if you have compassion, empathy, there's no way these things can't get to you. If you use the wrong brand, if you buy something from the wrong conglomerate, you can end up accidentally supporting human rights violations, labor exploitation, corporate greed, racist CEOs, toxic workplaces, environmental damage. How are you supposed to always do the right thing when something as small as buying toothpaste could be an issue? And that's one thing I have discovered, and I keep reminding people, doing these more in-depth kind of like research videos about brands, I don't think I found a single brand who doesn't have some form of issue, whether it's their problematic CEOs, as I've mentioned, breaking the law in certain countries, not treating their staff correctly. I've not come across a single brand that you can't trace back to something problematic. So as I was saying, you start off wanting to do the right thing, but eventually the volume, the frequency of negative news stories and moral questions, it leads to detachment for a lot of people. You stop reacting with outrage, not because you don't care, but because you're burnt out. On top of that, you've also got to deal with the fact that these big corporations didn't make it easy to find out what's really going on behind the scenes. And they know that you're probably too tired to go through all the effort to find out as well. They've mastered the art of performative activism, vague sustainability claims, as we know, dropping a diversity campaign during Pride Month, and then quietly promoting harmful initiatives in the background. So very common. They rely on the fact that most average everyday consumers won't have the energy or even the foresight, to dig deeper than what they're telling us. And even if we do, even if a major story breaks out about, a big brand shady operations, they often don't change anyway. They've all been through massive scandals before, they've recovered, and they'll do it again. They know that we're exhausted by all the ethical questions we face on a daily basis. People are tired of learning that the brand is unethical, then trying to find an ethical alternative, realizing that the alternative is either far more expensive or just doesn't exist. Then when they do find an alternative, it probably isn't any good or perfect either, ending up back at square one because either the alternative doesn't exist, we can't afford it if it does exist, or because the alternative also has its own ethical issues. It's a vicious circle. And it's a strategy that works. People feel trapped in a system where every option is flawed, so instead of fighting it, it's easier to just tune it out. The only way to avoid letting yourself be overwhelmed by this moral fatigue is to accept that it isn't realistic for everyone to be able to make a truly ethical purchase all the time. And pretending otherwise is doing more harm than good. Let's stick with cosmetics as an example. In a perfect world, we'd all be able to buy products that had sustainably sourced ingredients, right? Fully transparent supply chains, cruelty-free, vegan, inclusive formulas packaged in 100% recyclable, compostable materials from a small independent brand that pays everyone fairly. But unfortunately, in the real world, there are major roadblocks to this ethical ideals, some structural and some personal. A major concern for a lot of people is that ethical often means expensive. We all know that ethically made products usually cost more because they pay fair wages, invest in eco-friendly materials, and don't cut corners. But not everyone can afford a $65 moisturizer when the $8 one works just as well that you find in the drugstore, right? This turns ethical consumption into a privilege, not a baseline. And if you're lucky enough to be able to afford to pay more for ethical products, you don't get to use your privilege to judge others who can't afford to do the same. This is why I hate the clean beauty world, because this is deeply rooted in that. There is no universal definition of ethical, right? Ethics aren't a one-size-fits-all. What's ethical to you might not be for somebody else. For example, one brand might be vegan but underpay workers in their supply chain. Another might be inclusive in shade range but owned by a parent company with a sketchy track record. A small indie brand might be cruelty-free but lack accessibility or inclusivity. So trying to shop 100% ethically it becomes a game of trade-offs, essentially, and it's exhausting to try and keep score of it all. And on top of that, you've got to contend with greenwashing, confusing marketing, brands know ethical sell, so they slap on buzzwords, as we know, like sustainable, clean, conscious, kind, even when their product or the conglomerate or the brand that own the products barely meets any of these standards, right? Without full transparency, we're relying on marketing claims and vague certifications that we truly don't understand what they're talking about. Even the most well-intentioned and informed shopper can be misled. So at the end of the day, we all really are just stuck in this flawed system. The beauty industry, like most industries, is part of a global capitalist system. Ingredients are often sourced across continents, packaging produced in factories with unclear labor standards. Supply chains are opaque by design. Many ethical brands are still owned by larger corporations. It's nearly impossible to make a purchase that is entirely outside of that system. All we can really do is aim for consciousness and not perfection. It's easier to think, is my purchase aligned with my values as much as possible? Is this brand at least trying to do better? Do I understand the trade-offs here? Am I okay with them? Even small shifts like supporting indie brands when you can, buying less, coming from me, or doing research when you can really does matter. Chapter 4, it's easier to hold one person accountable for it all. Now, despite big corporations often behaving far more unethically than most influencer brands, this moral fatigue leads to selective outrage. You can't fight every battle. We know that, right? Your brain starts choosing what to be outraged about and what to push to the back of your mind. And for most of us, these big corporations seem untouchable, right? We think there's no point even trying. Probably not tagging Jeff Bezos, right, in your Instagram story. There's no CEO vlogging their thought process, but they are just not at those levels. Most statements are written by PR teams. There's no one individual to target blame at. Even when you boycott a brand, it's probably owned by a parent company with 40 other sub-brands. But influencers, on the other hand, are much easier targets. They're right there on the apps they're already using. They've replied to your comments before, maybe even DMs. They have public social media accounts. They have a comment section that might actually get read. They've built their whole personal branding on their connection with you. So you hope they might actually listen to you. That level of direct accountability makes it easier to call them out, criticize them, and rally others around that criticism. They're human, visible, and reachable. We feel like what we say and do might actually have an impact, and sometimes it does. We often think that if we stop buying from a certain brand, it won't make any difference. They've got so many customers, they probably won't even notice an impact. And even if they do, it might not even be big enough for them to make a change. But part of the trouble is that we don't see the impact we have on them a lot of the time. Brands don't tell us how many customers they have, but when an influencer has done something wrong, you see their numbers go down in real time. Their views drop, their followers drop. You see other people in the comments section making the same criticisms as you are. You see the real impact you have, maybe not on your own, but if an influencer loses thousands or millions of followers, you see it. If L'Oreal loses 1 million customers, you probably wouldn't notice unless you go like looking for sales figures and financial reports online, which who's doing that? Maybe other than me. And they're often impossible to find anyway. We also tend to be more emotional when we can aim our criticisms at one specific person. Most of us don't know who the CEO of L'Oreal, Nestle, or Unilever is. It takes a quick Google, but we know the influencer we've been following for years who appears on our social media pretty much every single day across every single platform. Influencers are people, not logos or brand names, and people are emotional about other people. When someone you've watched for years launches a brand or makes a mistake, you're not just critiquing a product, you're confronting a person's character, right? That makes it way much more personal. You end up seeing comments like, you're a sellout, you're trying too hard, you lied to us, you're a hypocrite, I thought you were different, blah, 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 etc., etc. The kind of things you say to a friend if they really pissed you off and stabbed you in the back. But when it comes to criticizing big corporations, the critique is actually often more abstract, like, this company is problematic, the system is broken. That detachment also means people don't feel as compelled to act, or they simply accept that the corporations are going to be shady. That's just how they are. And it means that if you do call them out, people probably aren't going to react as strongly. It's much easier to go viral calling out one person, whereas if you expose a massive brand for like their wrongdoings, the reaction might be like, well, yeah, we already knew that. What can we even do? Sucks. Still need shampoo, you know? But if you are calling out a specific influencer, it's far more likely to spread Like the news of drama, influencer drama, always travels fast, right? People love it. It feels like real tea, real drama. We feel like they owe us something sometimes. And we love to see influencers fail when they've done something shady, or even when they're making money, which I'll talk about in another video. So when I was talking about this brand, it kind of felt like an extension of all of the above. People related this influencer to a certain thing, and me talking about it then made them relate me to that, which I completely get. You know, I was talking about the brand, less so the person, like I do in a lot of these behind the brand videos. And in the end, I really just think this comes down to feeling powerless. We often feel like we don't have the power to make big changes, you know, or to fix major problems in the world. And we don't like feeling powerless. But with influencers, we're pretty much on the same level. We're all people, right? Even when they're millionaires, you know? So when they mess up, we feel like we can actually do something about it, because we can. Calling out huge conglomerates like L'Oreal won't get you much, but making a TikTok video about an influencer's new brand could go viral. You feel like you're doing something, even if it doesn't change much in the grand scheme of things. It feels like you can actually make a change. It feels like your voice is actually going to be heard, and it is, and it can. And as I mentioned, what prompted this video is some of the comments I received, which I fully expected and are completely fair. I go on their page and I see them sporting Starbucks, Nestle. Dove is a huge one. I did a video recently on how Dove are literally just polluting everyone everywhere, but for some reason, they don't matter. This influencer product launch matters way more to them. Even though the unethical things corporations are doing are often far worse than most influencer brands, it hurts us more because those influencers are real people who sold us on their trust and convinced us that we were friends, and we feel betrayed. Influencers feel closer to us, so we hold them to a much higher standards. Is that the right thing to do? Maybe not, but big corporations feel untouchable, so we let them off the hook. But in the end, both are part of the same system, right? And the question isn't just who are we mad at, it's why we're mad, and what it says about the world we're navigating as consumers. So we know that outrage over influencer brands isn't just about bad products, boring packaging, or an eyelash scandal. It's about something deeper, right? Like trust, power, and the weight of living in a world where everyone is selling you something all at the same time.